Welcome back to our channel. Today we bring you a story that will shake you to your core, a confession that remained hidden for decades, finally surfacing at the most unexpected moment. A story about secrets, guilt, and the price of silence in a small American city. This is a tale where one man's dying breath becomes the catalyst for truth that shatters everything the community believed about themselves. But before we begin, we want to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your city and state in the comments below. We read every single one, and we'd love to know where you're joining us from today. The autumn rain hammered against the windows of St. Catherine's Hospital in Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Outside, the leaves had turned a sickly brown, clinging desperately to bare branches. Inside room 412, Michael Sullivan lay dying. His weathered skin was stretched thin over his bones, and the monitors beside his bed beeped with the irregular rhythm of a failing heart. He was 84 years old, and his time was running out. Michael had lived his entire life in Millbrook, a town of about 15,000 people nestled between rolling hills and quiet farmland. He'd been a pillar of the community, a man everyone respected. For 53 years, he'd been the superintendent of the municipal water treatment plant. He was on the church board, sponsored Little League teams, and had been married to the same woman, Eleanor, for 60 years. But as Michael lay there, struggling for each breath, something was tormenting him. His daughter, Catherine, sat beside his bed, holding his trembling hand. She'd been with him for the past 12 hours, watching her father fade into the shadows of death. "Mum's at home resting," Catherine said softly. "She'll be back in the morning, Dad. Just try to sleep." Michael shook his head, his eyes suddenly urgent despite his weakened state. "No, I need Father Donnelly. Now. Please." Catherine frowned. Her father wasn't particularly religious. He went to church on Christmas and Easter, but that was it. This urgency was strange, unsettling. "Dad, it's almost midnight. Can't this wait until—" "It can't wait." Michael gripped her hand with surprising strength. "Please, call the hospital chaplain, or the church, anyone. I need to confess." Something in his voice, raw, desperate, weighted with decades of burden, made Catherine move. Within 40 minutes, Father Thomas Donnelly arrived at the hospital. He was in his mid-60s, with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of a man who'd heard countless confessions. Catherine kissed her father's forehead and left the room, waiting outside in the hallway. What followed was the longest confession Father Donnelly had heard in his 30 years of priesthood. For nearly 2 hours, Michael Sullivan's voice, raspy and fragile, poured out a story that the priest struggled to reconcile with the man he thought he knew. The truth began in 1971. Michael was a young engineer then, ambitious and idealistic. He'd just been hired at the water treatment facility after earning his degree. The plant manager at the time was a man named George Hartwell, a bully who'd been running the facility for 20 years with outdated methods and dangerous shortcuts. One afternoon, Hartwell discovered that their filtration systems were contaminated with industrial runoff from the old textile mills upstream. The contamination was significant, and fixing it would cost the town hundreds of thousands of dollars, money the municipal budget didn't have. Hartwell called Michael into his office and made him an offer he framed as inevitable. "We can report this," he said, his voice cold and matter-of-fact, "and the town will go into debt for a decade. Families will lose their jobs as the budget gets cut. The schools will suffer, or—" He paused, letting the silence hang heavy. "We increase the chlorine levels slightly to mask the taste and smell. Monitor it carefully and keep this quiet. People will get sick," Michael had protested. "Maybe," Hartwell shrugged. "Maybe not. Millions of people drink contaminated water every day and live fine. Besides, who's going to know? The tests can be adjusted." Michael was young, afraid, and desperately wanted to keep his job. His wife was pregnant with Catherine, so he stayed quiet. The contamination continued for months, then a year, then 5 years. During that time, cases of gastrointestinal illness in Millbrook ticked up. Children experienced chronic diarrhea. Elderly residents developed severe kidney issues. The local hospital's pediatric ward became increasingly busy with complaints of nausea and abdominal pain. Dr. Eleanor Vasquez, a young physician at Millbrook General, began to notice a pattern. She published a local report suggesting environmental contamination, but Hartwell, who had connections to the town's mayor, had the report buried. He discredited Dr. Vasquez's findings, called her theories alarmist, and within a year she left town, taking her warnings with her. The contamination was finally discovered in 1977 by a state environmental inspector doing a routine audit. By then, over 200 people had suffered serious illnesses. 12 children had developed chronic kidney problems. 3 elderly residents had died, though their deaths were officially attributed to other causes. The scandal was local, but not national. A small Pennsylvania town's environmental disaster barely made regional news. Hartwell was fired, but the investigation was quietly settled. The town was compensated by the state, and the water treatment facility was completely renovated. But here was where Michael's confession took its darkest turn. He didn't speak up. He didn't go to authorities. He didn't tell anyone that he knew about the contamination from the beginning. And when Hartwell took the fall alone, Michael actually felt relieved. His guilt, he told Father Donnelly, had been manageable as long as no one knew. For 46 years, Michael had built a life on that silence. He was promoted to superintendent after Hartwell's departure. He became respected. He was given authority over the very system he'd helped poison. He made sure, very carefully, that nothing like that would ever happen again under his watch, as if that could somehow balance the cosmic scales. But it couldn't, and now, dying, with nothing left to lose, Michael needed to tell the truth. Father Donnelly sat in stunned silence when Michael finished speaking. The priest's face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he held Michael's hands through the confession. "Michael," Father Donnelly said carefully, "do you understand what you're telling me? Children were harmed, people died." "I know," Michael whispered. His eyes were closed, tears streaming down his weathered face. "That's why I'm confessing. I've carried this my entire life. I never slept properly. Every sick child I heard about, every funeral I attended, I wondered if it was because of me, because of my silence. This is..." Father Donnelly paused, choosing his words with care. "This goes beyond what confession is meant to contain, Michael. These are crimes, crimes of negligence, conspiracy. People deserve to know the truth." "I know," Michael said again. "That's why I'm asking you. I'm asking you to tell them. After I'm gone. I don't deserve mercy. I don't deserve forgiveness, but they deserve the truth." Father Donnelly left that hospital room at 2 in the morning, his faith tested in ways he'd never experienced before. The seal of confession is sacred. A priest cannot reveal what is told to him in confession without the penitent's explicit permission. Michael had given that permission. He'd asked Father Donnelly to share his confession with the world. Michael Sullivan died 3 days later, in the early morning hours, with Catherine and Eleanor at his bedside. What happened next tore Millbrook apart. Father Donnelly waited until after Michael's funeral to speak. He first went to the police, then to the local press. He shared Michael's confession, and within 48 hours, every media outlet in Pennsylvania was covering the story. Local investigators reopened the files on the 1971-1977 water contamination. They discovered that the records of the affected families were still documented in the Municipal Health Department archives. Lawyers descended on Millbrook like vultures. Families who'd had children sickened in the 1970s, children who were now in their 50s, suddenly had questions and sought answers. Some had developed chronic health problems that, upon investigation, could be traced back to heavy metal exposure during childhood. The municipal government faced lawsuits in the tens of millions of dollars. The water treatment facility was subjected to federal investigation. It turned out that several of Michael's successors had also looked the other way on smaller violations over the years, a culture of silence that Michael had inadvertently begun. The town council voted to offer settlements to affected families, not out of generosity, but because the legal liability was crushing. Some of the older residents who'd been children during the contamination years discovered that kidney and digestive issues that had plagued them their entire adult lives had a source, a cause, a culprit. George Hartwell, who'd moved to Florida and lived quietly for 46 years, was brought back to Pennsylvania for questioning. Now 92 and suffering from dementia, he could barely understand the charges being discussed. He died in a nursing home 8 months later. But Michael Sullivan's confession had another, more profound effect on Millbrook. The community was forced to confront its own complicity. Yes, Hartwell had made the initial decision, and Michael had gone along with it. But the town had also benefited from that silence. Lower water bills, no economic disruption, business as usual. The citizens had been comfortable not asking too many questions when the alternative was inconvenience. Catherine, who'd inherited her father's house and his name, became an advocate for victims' rights. She worked with families in the affected group to ensure they received fair compensation. She became a voice for transparency in municipal government, and she ran for city council and won on a platform of accountability. Eleanor, Michael's widow, gave a statement to the press that was carried by national news outlets. "My husband suffered for 46 years, she said, her voice steady and dignified. He couldn't enjoy his life because he knew what he'd done. He couldn't forgive himself. I'm not here to defend him. What he did was wrong, but I also know that he paid for it every single day. Sometimes I think that's the real tragedy. Not that he lived with his guilt, but that he felt he had to live with it alone for so long." The confession that began on a deathbed had unraveled not just Michael Sullivan's life, but the comfortable illusions that Millbrook had built around itself. Father Donnelly faced his own moral reckoning. Some in his parish questioned whether he should have told the police before telling the press. Others argued that his duty to the victims transcended the seal of confession. The debate about his actions continued for years in theological circles and in the pages of religious publications. 6 months after Michael's death, a memorial plaque was installed at Millbrook's town hall. It listed the names of the 12 children who developed chronic kidney problems from the contaminated water. It listed the 3 elderly residents who died, and it bore a simple inscription: "We remember, we acknowledge, we will do better." The water treatment facility was renamed the Michael Sullivan Memorial Water Treatment Center, not as an honor to Michael, but as a reminder of what happens when the people entrusted with public safety choose silence over truth. But perhaps the deepest change was invisible. In the years following Michael's confession, Millbrook citizens became more vigilant. They asked more questions at town meetings. They demanded more transparency from municipal officials. They created a culture where speaking up about potential wrongdoing became not just accepted, but expected. It took one man's dying breath, one final act of contrition, and one priest's willingness to break a silence held sacred by centuries of tradition to change an entire city. Michael Sullivan had spent 46 years trying to carry his secret to the grave. In the end, he couldn't, and perhaps in that failure to keep his secret, he finally did something right. There you have it. A confession that changed everything. What Michael Sullivan kept hidden for nearly half a century finally surfaced, and the consequences rippled through an entire community. Sometimes, the truth is the most powerful force we have. What did you think of Michael's confession? Do you think he was wrong to stay silent for so long, or was he trapped by circumstances? Let us know in the comments below. And remember, if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of secrets, betrayals, and plot twists that will leave you shocked, subscribe to this channel right now and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. We have many more macabre stories waiting for you. Stories that will haunt you. Stories that will make you question everything. So join our community of truth seekers and mystery lovers today. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and never miss a story again. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.